Hi, thank you so much for having me, and I look forward to seeing how the things in my discussion here fit in with these currents about the stories we tell, the narratives we hear, who gets to tell them, and how they become resources for thinking about changes to make going forward. So to that end then, I would like to start with the very opening scene from the MTV series, Sweet Vicious.
This show contains a sexual assault scene that may be difficult for some viewers to see. Viewer discretion is advised.
Take whatever you want. I have money. We can go to an ATM.
Truth or dare?
What?
Truth it is. Do you know this girl? No, you know this girl!
Just you watch me!
Oh, maybe? Oh, hold on. Say her name.
I don't know who that is.
Try again.
Oh, Beth. Her name is Beth.
I'm scared, well, you feel powerless. Do I have consent? Well, I want you to think about Beth. Think about the music you played to drown out her screaming, the tears that filled her eyes when you held her down, when you forced yourself into her.
No, please, no. I'll do anything.
I'm sorry. I thought no one guess. My bad. You didn't stop when she said no, did you, Will?
No, I didn't stop. I didn't. I'm so sorry. I didn't mean to hurt anyone. Please, I'm so sorry.
If you ever do to anyone else what you did to Beth, I will be back. Call 911. Tell them you've been robbed and you need a paramedic for your leg wound.
What?
Don't pull that out till we get here. It's gonna get messy.
So to me, this opening vignette effectively captures where gendered experiences and digital technologies overlap, particularly when it comes to issues of rape, risk, justice, and especially vengeance. These themes are at the heart of Sweet Vicious and may even be behind the low numbers leading to its cancellation. Running from 2016 into 2017 for only 10 episodes, Sweet Vicious is the story of two young women attending the fictional Darlington College by day and beating the crap out of campus rapists at night. Ophelia, a cynical pothead and a hacker, and Jules, a straight-A sorority sister, find themselves unlikely allies in vengeance and eventually anonymous campus heroes. Sweet Vicious isn't the first show to tackle campus rape from the perspective of young women. From 2004 to 2007, Veronica Mars addressed many of these same issues in story arcs that spanned multiple seasons and suggested that the issue isn't a rapist or two, but rather the normalization of sexual assault, a rape culture. This series followed the life of a young woman who finds herself a social outcast after her best friend was murdered and her father, the sheriff, arrested the most powerful man in town for the crime. Veronica's dad is now a private investigator, and Veronica has picked up on some of his techniques. Other students, especially other young women, go to her for help in solving their own problems. Despite being separated by over a decade, these two programs have a lot in common. Canceled too soon, smart-mouthed protagonists, representations of the dangers of campus life for young women, and the ways in which these protagonists use ordinary tools and technologies to navigate this culture. Such popular representations of the conditions in which young women live, work, and study provide us with a shared and affective set of resources about sexual violence, which is especially as important as conversations about these issues become more audible and widespread. Before looking at some examples in closer detail, I want to clarify what technologies means for me in this context. Here I am using technologies to refer to tools and devices, material things put to specific uses. I am also using technologies in the spirit of Foucault's technologies of power as forms of truth-making and knowledge deployment about certain domains of life. Technologies of power are productive. They make bodies into subjects and subjects into objects of knowledge. The technologies these young women use help shape their knowledge and their truths about the gendered power dynamics in which they find themselves. They help us get closer to what young women may experience as ordinary, including how they may situate themselves in relation to the normalization of sexual violence. To this end, I want to look at two interrelated types of technologies: cell phones and other digital tools, as well as everyday tools that operate as technologies of power and of resistance. Digital technologies are a staple of Veronica Mars and of Sweet Vicious. Even over a decade ago, Veronica Mars wove their use into the daily life of its characters. Veronica never goes anywhere without her cell phone and often has her laptop stashed in her shoulder bag. What distinguishes Veronica from most of her contemporaries, including other ones on TV at the time, are how she uses these technologies. Some, like bugs and tracking devices, she borrows from her father's private eye stash. Some are created, turning an MP3 player into a camera, for instance. Others are even less specialized, like photoshopping images or creating incriminating websites. All of them are presented as a double-edged sword. Just as these digital technologies can be used for Veronica to advance her own agenda, they can also be leveraged against her. They create environments in which these young women have to judge if the risk is worth the reward. For instance, in MAD, Carmen, one of Veronica's classmates, decides to break up with her long-term boyfriend, Tad. He rejects Carmen's choice and shows her a video of her at a party drunk, making sexually explicit comments. He blackmails her with this footage in order to keep their relationship intact, an illustration of how digital technologies can be used for surveillance to police young women's behaviors. Carmen turns to Veronica for help, and she comes up with a scheme to turn the tables on Tad. If these technologies can be used to threaten Carmen, Veronica reasons, they can also be used to free her from Tad's possessive and controlling ways. Carmen agrees to feign a renewed interest in their relationship, and the two spend the day together at the beach, on the boardwalk, performing and documenting a supposedly perfect love in selfies the entire time. Veronica repurposes these images to create a different narrative about Carmen and Tad. As a cover for a fictional romantic relationship between Tad and another man, which would be disastrous for Tad's dream of joining the US Navy in the don't ask, don't tell era. Carmen eventually chooses not to deploy these photoshopped images and instead decides that she doesn't need to feel bad about engaging in the sexual behaviors Tad is trying to suggest are shameful. This episode, among many others, captures the complex dynamic of young women, technology, and sexuality as avenues for self-expression, as well as for monitoring and control. Sweet Fishes also illustrates the ways in which technologically mediated environments can simultaneously empower and exploit women. For instance, in the episode called Sucker, Jules and Ophelia go after a man who had been using a fake profile on an online dating site to meet women and then sexually assault them. Ophelia puts her skills to good use, creating bait profiles to get him talking and then digging into the digital traces he's left behind to figure out who he really is. One of his victims, Jessie, is making intimate, heart-wrenching video diaries in which she attempts to make sense of what happened. She tells us, "I'm so stupid, maybe this is my fault. He held me down in that gross bathroom and I can still feel the concrete and I'm so sorry." The episode moves seamlessly back and forth between such experiences of danger and of agency and of doubt and of control in ways that echo what it's like to live in and live through these technologies. Significantly, it's the way that these technologies can be harnessed to tell stories of assault and abuse that spur Jules and Ophelia into action here. The tools that Veronica, Jules, and Ophelia use are effective not in and of themselves, but because of their imaginative facility with what they have on hand. These young women adapt digital technologies to reach goals that are deliberately and specifically emancipatory. As Jules explains, there is stuff happening out there and no one is doing anything about it. People are just getting away with awful things. I'm trying to make some of that right. Yet digital technologies are not the sole or even necessarily the most effective ways to reach this reckoning. The lo-fi tools that these women also put into practice are equally revealing about our contemporary discourses of power, sexuality, and violence. For instance, at the end of the second episode of Sweet Vicious, Jules considers leaving her vengeful ninja activities behind. Ophelia brings her to one of the on-campus women's washrooms, where an entire wall is covered in various handwriting, a host of women anonymously naming their rapists. This series about digital technologies and environments, online dating, fake profiles, identity theft, hacking, is motivated by an old school technology, the writing on the bathroom wall. The wall is Sweet Vicious's own whisper network, an informal, under-the-radar network of often women warning other often women to watch out for certain male friends, colleagues, or coworkers, usually due to a history of unwanted sexual behavior. The sheer scale of this list, its intimate location, its DIY ethos, tells us about young women's experiences of bodily autonomy and security. It tells us that women often rightly suspect they won't be listened to if they choose to report sexual assault on campus. It tells us that the people most likely to believe these reports are other women. Here and on non-fictional campuses across North America, the privacy and anonymity of whisper networks and bathroom walls makes it possible for women to help each other stay safe in an environment that doesn't prioritize their safety. Other DIY tools give us additional indications of the dynamics of these spaces. We can think of these as what personal safety training terms weapons of opportunity, an ordinary object that can be used as a weapon in a physical encounter. If weapons of opportunity are things that happen to be on hand, we can understand more about the spaces in which young women are vulnerable by paying attention to what these things are. Popular discourses tell us, and especially tell women, that they are most vulnerable in insecure public spaces, parking garages, parks after dark, that sort of thing. Listening to women's actual experiences, we learn that they are most vulnerable with those they already know and trust, in spaces presumed to be safe, at work, at home, at school. And watching dramatized representations, like Veronica Mars in Sweet Vicious, we can learn this same thing. In season 3 of Veronica Mars, she is on the trail of a serial rapist at her college, who turns out to be her classmate, Mercer Hayes. He has been meeting his victims at campus parties, spiking their drinks, and raping them while they are unconscious. He corners Veronica at one of these parties, and she reaches for the closest thing at hand to defend herself, a toy unicorn that has fallen under the bed. Not sure how well you can see that. This scene is telling. It tells us unambiguously what many women have known all along. Women are at the most risk for sexual violence from someone they already know in spaces where they are supposed to be safe. Veronica's weapon of opportunity, a unicorn figurine, is a visual reminder that rape happens in intimate, private, safe spaces. Just like the smartphone, the unicorn figurine is also a technology of power, and also a way in to some of the knowledges and truths of what it can mean to be a young woman in a rape culture. As both of these series continue, they also teach us that structures of power and authority are indifferent to, or sometimes even hostile, to holding young men accountable for their actions. Consider the reaction of the local sheriff of Neptune when Veronica attempts to report her own rape after being drugged at a party with her friends the night before.
Veronica, what happened to you? I need to report a crime.
Is there anyone in particular you'd like me to arrest, or should I just round up the sons of the most important families in town? I've got not a shred of evidence to work with here, but that really doesn't matter to your family now, does it? Look at this. She cries. I'll tell you what, Veronica Mars, why don't you go see the wizard? Ask for a little backbone.
When we find him, they...
Consider too the season and series finale of Sweet Vicious. Jules and Ophelia have publicly revealed Jules' rapist, the college's golden boy and football star. Twitter explodes with more suggestions of whom the pair should go after next. They create a website, an anonymous digital wall for anyone to report their own experience of sexual assault. Within minutes of its launch, it fills up with submissions, so many that they fall off the front page. Sexualized violence against women is a distinguishing feature of contemporary life. Technologies of all sorts are central to this task of narrating and mapping experiences of social space. The kinds of weapons and the uses to which they are put construct geographies of sexualized violence which extend past poorly lit parking lots. Yet just as these tools and weapons indicate how gender hierarchies can permeate social space, they also encourage forms of movement that attempt to break through such boundaries. In 2006, Veronica tells one of her classmates, "You get tough, you get even." A decade later, Jules and Ophelia are taking her advice. Let us all start listening to these truths so that in another 10 years, our fictional heroines don't have to follow in these footsteps.